Well, we know that tax rates are going to likely remain low until 2026. I don't believe that once 2026 rolls around, we're going to see a dramatic rise in tax rates. They're going to revert back to what they were in 2017. But eventually the math challenges facing our country are going to catch up with us. So as we get to 2028, 2030 and beyond, the national debt will be so high that the cost of servicing all that debt will consume just about the entire federal budget. And so that's really the day of reckoning for our country, when the federal government will be constrained to raise taxes just to be able to pay for non-discretionary expenses. Well, so I love it when things make sense conceptually. And a lot of people will read The Power of Zero and they'll say, well, gosh, this makes a lot of sense conceptually. But I love it even more when things make sense mathematically. And so the whole goal of the before and after comparison is to make the case mathematically that by adopting a 0% tax approach to retirement, that you're going to be mathematically better off than you otherwise would. So what we do is we say, hey, look, had you kept on doing what you're doing, you never met me, and tax rates stayed about where they are today, how long would your money last? When would you run out of money? How many after-tax dollars will you be able to spend? And then we'll say, hey, look, if you were to implement all of the recommendations that we recommend that you implement, you get at or near the 0% tax bracket in retirement, get your Social Security tax-free, how much longer could your money last? And guess what? If your money lasts 5 to 7 years longer, you spend an extra $1.5 million along the way. I think that at that point it's probably worth looking into. So that before and after comparison really makes the case mathematically that what we're recommending is going to push you further ahead than where you would otherwise be. Well, people really need to get the shifting done quickly enough that they get all the heavy lifting done before tax rates go up for good, but they want to do it slowly enough that they don't rise into a tax bracket that gives them heartburn. And the perfect amount of money to shift is what I call the magic number. And the magic number, I've got a calculator on my website, McKnight.com, which basically explains the perfect amount of money that you should be shifting each and every year between now and when tax rates are likely to go for good. So there are a couple of alternatives when it comes to mitigating the long-term care risk, and the traditional one is the one that really gives people heartburn, and that's to pay for a traditional long-term care insurance policy. And what that does is basically you're paying for something that you hope you never have to use. And if you should die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed the long-term care, then someone, that benefit's going to go to somebody else. What we advocate for is using what we call the life insurance retirement plan that gives you a death benefit that doubles as long-term care. And should you die peaceful in your sleep 30 years from now, never having needed long-term care, someone's still going to get that death benefit, probably your children or grandchildren, so there isn't that sensation of having paid for something that you sort of hope you never have to use. Okay, so there's a couple of things that we can do. Number one, we have got to get the debt under control. And what's driving the debt? It's primarily Social Security and Medicare, the two largest unfunded obligations in our country. So Social Security is relatively easy to fix. You just got to push that off into the future. So most people can qualify for Social Security at age 62. We got to push that age back. We're talking about very similar ages when Social Security first started out in 1935. We got to push that age back, maybe even to age 70 for people in my generation. And then ultimately we're going to have to raise more revenue because Medicare is probably the most expensive item in the budget. We've got to raise more revenue. So it's a combination of increasing revenue, cutting spending, really some combination of those two. So we know that at the end of 2017, with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, that the tax rates got cut. It's what I talk about in my book, The Power of Zero, the tax sale of a lifetime. So tax rates are now on sale. And we know that the rub here is that sale has an expiration date. Which means that every year between now and 2026, which is basically 4 years, represents a little mini window of opportunity within which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And every year that goes by where people fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates to get their highly taxable tax-deferred assets repositioned and tax-free means it's going to be a year beyond 2026 when they could be forced to pay the highest tax rates they're likely to see in their lifetime. So I've been doing this for over 23 years. I've helped put thousands of Americans on the road to the 0% tax bracket. And what I've noticed is it's nearly impossible to get to the 0% tax bracket by utilizing just one stream of tax-free income. You can't get there, for example, by simply contributing to a Roth IRA. You can't get there, for example, by simply owning an LIRP. To get to the 0% tax bracket typically requires multiple streams of tax-free income, none of which show up on the IRS's radar, but all of which contribute to you being in the 0% tax bracket. We know that what we want to do is we want to take advantage of every nook and cranny in the IRS tax code, because every stream of tax-free income that they allow has a different attribute that makes it unique. And when you use these streams of tax-free income in concert with each other, then it allows you to have a comprehensive, balanced approach to tax-free retirement planning. Well, I remember back in 2009, I was given a presentation in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, 2 days before midterm elections. And I remember when I was done with my presentation, everyone came up to me and they said, Dave, who should we vote for? Who should we vote for? And I never felt so powerful. And I said, you know what, it doesn't matter who you vote for, because whoever gets elected is going to inherit a math problem, the solution to which involves either doubling taxes, reducing spending by half, or some combination of the two. So whoever is running the federal government, whoever has the majorities in the House and the Senate, whoever has the White House, they're faced with a math challenge, and the challenge has to be solved by either doubling taxes, reducing spending by half, or really some combination of the two. Well, let me illustrate that with a story. A couple of months ago, a lady came up to me at the end of my presentation. She said, hey, Dave, thanks a lot. Now I'm in a really bad mood. I said, why are you in such a bad mood? She says, because I got all my money sitting in the tax-deferred bucket. And I said, let me see if I understand this correctly. You contributed money to your IRA at a period in time when tax rates were dramatically higher than they are today. You got a deduction at those higher rates for doing so. You now have a 4-year period of time during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. So you can get all those assets repositioned at tax-free, so that by the time tax rates double over time, you've done all the heavy lifting, you can then take those assets out tax-free. I said, is that why you're in such a bad mood? And she says, well, gosh, Dave, I never really thought about it that way. So the real question is, how is this story going to end for most Americans? And I would submit that so long as they take advantage of the next 4 years of historically low tax rates, that they get to determine how much of their hard-earned retirement savings that they get to spend. Well, the reality is that the expenses over time are not any higher than what you might find in a traditional 401k or a traditional brokerage account. And you know, with the LIRP, the expenses are a little bit higher in their early years, but they're much lower in the later years. But when you average it out over the life of the program, it's going to cost you about 1.5% of your bucket per year. So I like to tell people, whatever road you take in life, somebody's going to be making 1.5%. The question is, what are you getting in exchange for that 1.5%? And at least with the LIRP, you're getting a death benefit that doubles as long-term care. Well, the first thing I say is don't panic. I would say that 25 to 35% of the people who walk into my office every day do have pensions. And so I start off by saying, look, worry about the things that you can control. Don't worry about the things you can't control. The reality is that if you do have a pension that is construed as provisional income, it will likely cause Social Security taxation. So there's nothing that you can really do about that. However, you do have a lot of control over the rest of your assets. So your IRAs, your 401ks, you can still take advantage of historically low tax rates, get those assets shifted out of tax-deferred into tax-free while tax rates are historically low, so that by the time you reach retirement, you can at the very least take those assets out tax-free. Well, really what we want to do is we want to gather all the information about our client or prospect, and we want to situate their assets within the 3 buckets: taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free. We want them to be able to visualize their financial world through the power of zero lens, and we want them to recognize that they may have too much money in their taxable bucket or your tax-deferred bucket, and recognize the importance of systematically shifting those assets to the tax-free bucket. And then what we'll do is we'll lay out that before and after comparison. We typically run 3 comparisons. First one says, keep on doing what you're doing. Don't change a thing. How long will your money last? We'll do another projection that says, keep on doing what you're doing. Don't change a thing. Tax rates double. How much sooner will your money run out? And plot spoilers, about 10 to 12 years faster. And then we'll run a final comparison that says if you do everything that we recommend that you do, we get you at or near the 0% tax bracket. How much longer will your money last? And guess what? If your money lasts 5 to 7 years longer and you spend an extra $1.5 million along the way, I think at that point it's probably worth looking into. Well, in Chapter 6 of my book, The Power of Zero, I talk about how in 2017 tax rates went on sale, and tax rates today are about as low as we've seen in our lifetime, and we know that we have a 4-year period of time during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And once we get to 2026, those tax rates are going to revert back to what they were in 2017, and of course most experts agree that by the time we get to 2028, 2030 and beyond, the tax rates are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today. So we need to be looking at the next 4 years as little windows of opportunity during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. So the LIRP, or Life Insurance Retirement Plan, is a bucket of money that gets treated differently for tax purposes than anything else we've talked about so far. And what happens is you put money into this bucket, and as your money grows, your bucket begins to fill. Only the IRS says that the growth on the money in this bucket is going to be treated under a different section of the IRS tax code than anything else we've talked about so far. What does that section of the IRS tax code say? It says that as your money grows, you receive no 1099, so no tax as your money grows. When you take the money out, if you take it out the right way, it's not going to show up as reportable income on your tax return. That means no taxation, no provisional income, which is going to prevent your Social Security from being taxed. There are no contribution limits. I got clients that put anywhere from $50 a month to $200,000 per year, and everywhere in between. There are no income limitations. So unlike the Roth IRA that does have income limitations, you don't have any income limitations at all. And finally, if history serves as a model, there may be no legislative risk, which simply means that if history serves as a model, that should somewhere down the road they change the rules on this bucket, whoever has the bucket before the rule changes gets to keep it and continue to put money into it under the old rule for the rest of their lives. That's what we call a life insurance retirement plan. Back in 2009, the former Comptroller General of the U.S. government, David Walker, made a prediction. He said that, look, tax rates will have to double or we'll go broke as a nation. So we're marching into a future where nearly every economist agrees that tax rates down the road are likely to be much higher than they are today. And so for that reason, the main thesis of my book, The Power of Zero, is that we need to get you to the 0% tax bracket in retirement. Why? Because if tax rates at some point in your retirement were to double and you're in the 0% tax bracket, then 2 times 0 is still 0. Well, first of all, I think a lot of Americans sort of see the handwriting on the wall. They recognize that the government is spending money with reckless abandon. They know that at some point in time we're going to have to pay the piper. And historically, who has been the people that have paid the piper? It's really the American taxpayers. And so they're thinking about the fact that Americans have, upwards of $30 trillion in their retirement savings accounts, and all the federal government has to do to raise revenue to be able to pay for all of those unfunded obligations is to raise tax rates. And how much of their hard-earned retirement savings are they going to be able to keep? Well, that really comes down to how high tax rates really are going to go. So the federal government has promised way more than it can afford to deliver. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt. So at current tax rates, the national debt will continue to grow and compound over time. We're talking about $1 trillion per year. And we're going to get to the point where sooner or later, just servicing the interest on all the national debt, renting the money that we've already spent, is going to consume the entire federal budget. And so we're not going to have anything left for basic expenses, running the costs of the federal government, Smithsonian, welfare services, food stamps. There's not going to be anything left. And so the federal government's going to be constrained to raise taxes because of what we call non-discretionary spending, the things that they're required to pay for by law that they just can't get out of paying. And so it's all of these expenses that the federal government has promised that they can't afford to deliver is going to put our country on a fiscal path that is ultimately unsustainable. So Americans are going to have to sort of come to grips with the reality that tax rates down the road are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today.